All right, so big news came down this past Saturday as Ciryl Gane and Jon Jones will headline UFC 285. And guess what? It's for the vacant UFC heavyweight title. You can imagine what topic number 2 is right about now, huh? Anyway, look, this is a huge fight involving the former interim heavyweight champ and arguably the GOAT of MMA. We should be pumped, no? Early odds on this fight have gone as the favorite at minus 120, with Jones as the underdog at plus 100, according to Best Fight Odds. What is your reaction to this fight booking? And as I always do, I like to push you guys a little bit. Give me that early lean. Turning to the Junkie radio veteran for the first take goes. What say you?
Well, it was a little difficult for me because we waited 3 years for this guy to come back, right? I had other visions in my mind when we would get to this moment that we'd be talking about other things. For starters, I thought this fight would be at Allegiant Stadium. I mean, if we can't fill that with Jon Jones, one of the best to ever do it, I think the only shot we have is maybe with Conor McGregor right at that point. So that was a little bit of a letdown. But I'll tell you this much, man. The matchup with Ciryl Gane, it may not be as sexy, but I think it'll actually turn out to be a good fight. It just feels like a little bit of a letdown because of some of the names on this show that we've thrown around that didn't end up in the mix. That was a little sad. But for Jon Jones, I'll tell you what, I think this is a tough matchup for him. You know, I may be in the minority in this one, but I think when you lay down the tactics, what's going on, a 3-year layoff, that's going to be difficult to contend with. You have Ciryl Gane, who's very good tactical. Like that guy, he'll sit back in the pocket. He doesn't care if people boo at him. That doesn't bother him one bit. And you have to understand that Jon Jones is in a position where he probably wants to come back and be a wrecking force, right? Make a statement. I think what he needed was a guy that was going to be a little bit more reckless, which you might have gotten a little bit with Francis Ngannou. Somebody that was going to come forward because he's so good at making you pay for your mistakes. Jon Jones is going to have his hands full with this fight, man. I think Ciryl Gane. If you're going to make me take an early lean, George, I'm going to go Ciryl Gane. But as far as the announcement goes, it just lacked a little bit of oomph that we thought we were going to get when we said Jon Jones is back.
Yeah, and it didn't help that someone at T-Mobile was tripping. They put that thing up early, kind of ruined it. You know what I mean? All right, Fada, next to you, your reaction, and give me that early lean.
Yeah, exactly. You said it. I mean, when they leaked it, it kind of like I was very surprised to see it, obviously, but I think it would have been a lot more exciting if we saw it in the broadcast or if that's when they were planning on announcing it. But yeah, listen, it's not the matchup we expected. Of course, we were anticipating Jon Jones's return for so long. We were linking him to Stipe, and Francis Ngannou was those two. Nobody really thought of Ciryl Gane as an option. We matchmaked him against Ciryl and Curtis Blades and whatnot, but I think people were thinking either Stipe Miocic or Francis Ngannou. So to see that it was Gane, it's very surprising, but I don't hate it. I agree with Goz. I think this is potentially his toughest test, especially coming off of that layoff, because for me personally, it's hard to bet against Ciryl Gane. I know he just lost, or the fight before, to Francis Ngannou, but generally speaking, I'm not surprised to see him as a favorite, and I will lean towards Ciryl Gane just because he's a tough puzzle to solve. Now everybody's looking at the wrestling, right? They think that after he lost to Francis Ngannou, there could be a chink in his armor. And I remember I talked to Ciryl after his loss to Francis Ngannou before he fought Tai Tuivasa, and I asked him about that. I said, what do you think of people starting to critique? Because he's kind of been a perfect fighter, right? Unbeaten. He always says, you know, his game plan is to touch and not be touched. And then we saw against Francis Ngannou, it was a close fight. Hey, look, he was having success on the feet. Of course, Francis came in with an injured knee, but you know, Ciryl Gane on the feet is a handful to deal with for anybody, including Francis, I believe so, even if he was healthy. Now, obviously, Francis has the ultimate equalizer. But when talking about Jon Jones, all those attributes that Jon Jones usually has the advantage, now he's fighting a guy that kind of matches him in that regard in terms of the speed, the footwork, the movement, because Ciryl kind of moves like a middleweight. The grappling is the big question here. Of course, Jon Jones training with Henry Cejudo. We all know how much Henry Cejudo loves wrestling. He tries to implement. We saw the advancements that Zhang Weili made in her game when she worked with Henry Cejudo. So you can bet that, you know, Jon Jones will be looking, at least Henry Cejudo will be telling him to wrestle. But when I asked Ciryl about his wrestling and kind of the criticism, he was like, listen, my wrestling's not bad. He's like, I know I have some work to do, but I can wrestle. I don't want to say he took offense to it. I mean, he said it in the most bon gamin way possible, but he didn't seem to like it too much that people were critiquing his wrestling. And it was a year ago. I'm sure he's worked on it. So it'll be a very interesting fight for sure.
Great stuff from Fada. And I don't know what's cooler, hearing Danny Segura say Yoel Romero or Fada pronouncing Ciryl Gane's name the way it's supposed to be pronounced. Nolan, take it over.
Yeah, I can't do either of those, so sorry to disappoint. I'm just going to lead with that. No, I mean, I think that this fight, it's bottom line is we were on here week after week after week talking about Jon and when he'll come back and if he'll come back, and it was exhausting. So to actually have a booking to see the poster on the side of the building or on Twitter a couple hours later when the official announcement came was very refreshing to see, and it was a bit surreal. Like I said, no pun intended. To me, this is a great fight. I think that if you separate it from what we're going to talk about in a bit with Francis, I think that the priority here, one of them obviously from the start, has been trying to book Jon. Jon has been ready. Jon has been on good terms with the UFC. They came to a new agreement. Those are things that I think were a massive hurdle to get, for the UFC to get done. So the fact that those were done, then you needed to book him, right? And if Stipe wasn't ready, which he wasn't, Francis obviously is doing his thing, has separated from the company. This is the next best option. And I think, honestly, the fact that they couldn't get something done and the fact that it was dragged out for so long, I mean, they started to try to book this fight in November to have Jon fight somebody. That ended up helping Ciryl, where he was, a couple months ago, he was considered injured. The UFC was not looking at him as a potential option for this date because they were trying to book a fight for Jon then and there. That's when that kind of Curtis Blades talk came through. But Ciryl was in consideration at that time. He was just dealing with the injury. So I think the stars have really aligned for him, and people are overlooking him just because of the storylines that are going on here. I mean, Francis and Jon are two of the biggest stars in the sport. They deserve the shine. They deserve the talk. But it almost makes me think like people are sleeping too hard on Gane. I mean, the guy has been really stellar outside of the Francis fight where he was wrestled. And obviously, I'm sure Jon will try to go to those roots for, in this fight as well. But this is an intriguing matchup, and who knows how Jon's going to look with all this time out at a new weight class. I think we know what we're getting into with Ciryl Gane, and that's a really damn good fighter.
Yeah, and people are getting excited about it already. Look at me, Diamond44 in the chat room is saying Jones versus Stipe wasn't all that interesting. Gane is much more intriguing. I think a lot of people feel that way, and it's kind of weird to say that because, I think Stipe still can boast having the best credentials of a heavyweight ever. But yeah, he just hasn't been around lately, and that last fight, just looked awful. But anyhow, I wish I could. I mean, I'm pumped, and as we get closer, I'll be more pumped.